What's up, y'all? It's your boy JTMM, aka JustTenMoreMinutes, aka the Freakin 10, back again with more Sabaton history, and this time Panzerkampf, discussing the German invasion of the Soviet Union, which has kind of been the theme over I guess it's the last song. But this one, just, there's something that fascinates me about this. I can't put my finger on it. There's just something different about this battle that gets my attention. I'm also sitting here looking at this shot of Indy and Par in these jackets, and I'm like, okay, I'm assuming they're shooting this in the winter. Those are some sharp jackets. Well, let's check it out.
Indy Nidell.
And I'm Pat from Sabaton, and this is Sabaton History.
One of the largest tank battles in history, in 1943 in World War II, resulted in the Soviet Union gaining the initiative on the Eastern Front, which it would hold until the end of the war.
And our song Panzerkampf became one of the most unexpected Sabaton popular songs we ever did.
Into the motherland, the German army march.
So dirty.
The Panzerkampf was fought between the Wehrmacht and the Red Army, and here's the story behind it.
The Russian counteroffensives that had begun in November 1942 had pushed the Germans not only mostly out of the Caucasus, but also crossed into eastern Ukraine and southern Belarus. By March 1943, they had created a large salient deep into the German front lines between the cities of Orel and Kharkov. This was the Kursk salient and was an obvious target for German high command. By cutting off the salient, they would not only shorten the front line, but also trap a large amount of Russian soldiers and material. Such a success would give the Germans time to rebuild after the recent losses at Stalingrad. Both the forces of Army Group South, led by Generalfeldmarschall Erich von Manstein, and those of Army Group North under Generaloberst Walter Model were to perform a massive pincer movement that would smash through on both sides of the salient and encircle the troops inside. But many German generals expressed doubts. See, the Russian army of 1943 was not the same army they so easily outmaneuvered in 1941. By now, the Soviets were much more competent in using their deep battle doctrine, and they were already preparing a summer offensive to use the salient to their own advantage, since they also knew of the German plans. The British had cracked the German ciphers and given intel to the Soviets, so Stavka, Russian High Command, had convinced Stalin to delay the Soviet offensive until after the Germans had exhausted their own against the Russian defenses. Then the Soviet counteroffensive would easily punch through the German lines and collapse the whole Army Group center.
The Soviet Union, summer 1943.
This is the part that just fascinates me about war, is really who has the best information, right? In life, when we make the best decisions, it's because we have the best information. We have the most facts. We have the data that supports our decision, right? Data doesn't lie, and this being from a guy that's done data now for the past almost 15 years, data doesn't lie. Data can be manipulated, but data itself does not lie. And that's really what this comes down to, right? I mean, they intercepted this communication of what the plans were and say, okay, we know exactly what you're going to do. Let's hold off, and we'll hold you off, and then we will take you out. I mean, great strategy, but I mean, yeah, man. And this song is so good. I see why it's popular. It's so dirty. It's so gritty. It fits this perfectly.
Tanks line up in thousands, as far as I can see. Ready for the onslaught, ready for the fight.
I love his voice in this one.
For the access to march into the trap.
So, tens of thousands of Russian workers began building an enormous defense in-depth system, digging trenches and tank traps on 5,000 kilometers of front line. The defense was centered mostly on strong points manned by rifle battalions. Each also had 4.5-centimeter anti-tank guns. Russian pioneers lay up to 1 million mines all around the salient, both anti-personnel and anti-tank mines, mostly in front of their forward line. Red Army General Konstantin Rokossovsky had also a strong mobile defense force that would engage the Germans if they managed to penetrate the front lines. All in all, the Soviet forces enjoyed at least a 2-to-1 advantage in men, tanks, artillery, and aircraft. Von Manstein disregarded those numbers since he still believed in the inferior quality of the Soviet troops. Model was less optimistic and very much against the whole operation, but despite his doubts, Adolf Hitler and German High Command urged him to concentrate all his forces and attack from the north. Model, however, prepared for a possible Russian counterattack and held the 2nd Panzer Armee around the city of Orel in reserve. He also prepared the Hagenstellung, a defensive line the Germans could fall back on if everything went to hell. On July 5th, 1943, the German offensive began.
You know, this also shows how fickle war is, in the sense of one decision it can change an entire outcome, right? I mean, man. Well, let's see if that particular decision for him to not come from the south, but then go back up north to hold off those troops was a turning point. I wonder if it will be. I'm trying to think, because technically, had he not held them off, they would have come down and encircled them, and they would have been fighting in this much space rather than this much. Let's see. The German and Soviet Union battle, just the matchup, David versus Goliath, right? It is fascinating to me in this sense. I mean, because in all honesty, you look at the size of the Soviet Union, and Indy's talked about this in the previous episodes. But I think, to me, what gets me about it is, you know, it's me trying to go up against, you know, an entire neighborhood and try to take over the neighborhood, right? And that's just not going to turn out very well. It's the thought process behind it. Just, I get why, right? You're talking about unlimited resources. If you can influence people enough, you've now got, you know, unlimited people resources as well. But you're underestimating the heart of the people to defend their motherland. That's the part I think that really just gets me as to why you think that would be successful. Now, let's go.
Okay, it actually began with a Soviet artillery barrage that rained down on the German front lines. See, the day before, captured German soldiers had revealed the exact hour the offensive would begin, so tactical surprise was lost. Still, the German forces were soon moving toward the Russian lines under their own opening barrage of heavy artillery, mortars, and Nebelwerfer rockets. As usual, the advance was spearheaded by the German tank divisions and mobile Sturm divisions, but the minefields and the Soviet resistance slowed them down. However, the Germans had sent new weapon systems into the battle. Ferdinand tank destroyers could outrange their Russian counterparts, and German pioneers led radio-controlled demolition tanks into the minefields to clear the path. Well-positioned Tiger tanks could destroy whole groups of Russian tanks that were sent out in premature counterattacks. In the air, the superior German FW-190As were able to suppress the Russian fighter and bomber attacks, despite their disadvantage in numbers. So, as the days dragged on, the German advance took out several major strongpoints, and they even penetrated the first line of Rokossovsky's defenses. But the large defensive system slowly but steadily whittled away the German forces.
Yeah.
Tanks were damaged by the mines, and the relentless Russian artillery caused heavy casualties among the German infantry. German tank losses weren't actually as high as Russian sources may suggest. Only around 10% of Modul's tanks were lost, for example. The others took light damage, mostly to their tracks, which could usually be repaired in the field. Nonetheless, the Soviets achieved what they hoped for. They blunted the German spear, all while the Russian tank armies were building up for their own killing blow. On the 11th of August, Model finally called off the fruitless offensive. Only the elite SS Panzer divisions Totenkopf, Das Reich, and Leibstandarte in the south were still making progress as they reached the fields near a small village called Prokhorovka. The Stavka wanted to attack now, before Model could redeploy his panzers. The long-awaited counterattack, Operation Kutuzov, would set loose the Russian tank armies. Early in the morning of the 12th, Operation Kutuzov began.
Reinforce the front line, force the Axis to retreat. Sending all the reserves, securing their defeat. Soldiers of the Union broke the citadel, ruined Southern army.
You know, that's another interesting piece of this, right? I'm sitting and I'm looking at Modal's his advancement towards this small village. You know, when you think about that small village versus, or maybe it wasn't Modal, it was the other one, that, you know, is this big when you've got this much land behind you, that man, it's just, it fascinates me. Arrogance is not the right word, because obviously the German Panzer Division was highly effective, as we know the history of it. But Russia's just a different beast. That's the part that just boggles my mind, truly. Like, I don't lose sleep over it, but literally I was sitting there the other night just thinking strategically of what the thought process was of German high command in order to be successful. That's the part. That's what drives me to want to watch Indy's channel and work that into the schedule, is truly getting into like the battle by battle type of thing. To understand how this unfolded. So, you know, this battle is one of many that I want to dive into, but it's the overall thought process. I truly want to understand the psychology of it. Not that anybody could understand the high command psychology, but at least to hear some things to understand what they were thinking. Let's keep going.
In the south, those SS Panzer divisions were surprised by a wave of armor that was heading their way. Some 500 tanks that attacked the unprepared Germans. The backbone of the Russian tank force was the upgraded T-34-76 model, which made around 70% of the tanks. But most of the rest was made out of light tanks. Only a few heavy KV tanks were there. The Germans had far fewer tanks, not even 300, but those SS divisions were the first to receive the Tiger and Panther models that outclassed the T-34 in range and whose armor could not be penetrated by the lighter tanks. And yet, in larger groups, the T-34 was still extremely dangerous. The tanks clashed on the fields of Prokhorovka. The German tanks desperately fought off the Soviet tanks at point-blank range. German Panzer Grenadiers even resorted to ramming them with their half-tracks. Despite heavy losses, though, the Soviets forced the Germans to retreat.
Fields of Prokhorovka, where the heat of battle burned, suffered heavy losses, and the tide of war was turned. Driving back the Germans, fighting on four fronts, hunt them out of Russia, out of Soviet land.
In the north, the counteroffensive began with a massive artillery strike, obliterating much of the German forward positions of the 2nd Panzer Armee. The Soviet counterattack here would be even more deadly than in the south. Model's foresight had paid off, and the 2nd Panzer Armee was able to fend off the first wave of Russian tanks attacking towards Orel. But this was just the initial engagement. The overwhelming Russian artillery and armor soon broke into the German positions all over the front, and Model was forced to pull back just to prevent encirclement, without even waiting for authorization from Hitler. However, the Soviets failed to exploit their advantage, nor realize how close the German defenses were to collapsing. So the Germans managed a fighting retreat. As the Red Army captured the major prize of Orel on August 5th, the German army retreated into their Hagen position. And it was that which ultimately saved them. German high command was now forced to face the fact that the German army was not able to fight high-intensity battles on such a large scale any longer. The offensive had been a disaster. For not only did it not bring victory, it cost the German army the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front, and they would never regain it. The offensive had cost the Russians dearly, yes, and losses were perhaps 4 times higher than those of the Germans. But the Russians could replace their losses, which the Germans by this time could not. The Russians were on the offensive for good.
The end of the Third Reich draws near. Its time has come to an end. The end of an era is here. It's time.
Yeah, I mean, at some point it just becomes a battle of numbers, right? I mean, you know, Russian has unlimited, not really unlimited, but has a lot more resources, right, than Germany did. I mean, ultimately, Germans fighting on so many fronts, I mean, you're limited in what you can do, where Russia's really got the advantage there. That's the fascinating part of this to me, is just the thought process of the German high command of what the strategy would be. Get the reasoning. But ultimately, the decision to try and do that is what just boggles my mind.
Now, Panzerkampf is from the album Art of War, but it was not one of the singles or anything, right?
No, it was very interesting that we didn't believe so much in the song Panzerkampf initially.
Okay.
And there were so many songs that we felt that were more stronger on the Art of War album. Even though this album is now over 10 years,
Yeah.
this specific song can climb to the position #1 of all Sabaton songs.
Panzerkampf! Into the motherland, the German army marched.
So why do you suppose that is? What is it about it that you think resonates with people?
I think that the song represents a lot that is Sabaton.
Right?
It has a huge scale battle, tanks, more tanks, and even more tanks, and most tanks. A lot of our fans, this is what they want to hear about. Also, it has the power, the sing-along things,
Yeah.
very powerful chorus.
Thinking even back before that, when you guys wrote the song, was it written to be a typical Sabaton song with tanks and stuff? Or was it were you specifically thinking about that battle?
We were specifically thinking about that battle because all the songs on the Art of War represents one of the chapters in the scripts.
Right.
The Art of War.
It's just a great
The
beat.
Sabaton album, The Art of War, is named after one of the world's classic pieces of literature. It is traditionally attributed to the ancient Chinese military leader Sun Tzu, though some of it likely dates from before his time. It's roughly 2,500 years old, and though it is ancient military strategy, it is in many ways timeless and has applications beyond the military, such as in business, law, and even sports. This is because its 13 chapters do not only deal with things like waging war or incendiary attacks, but also include the use of spies, identifying weak spots, and strategic planning. Basically, winning the fight without having to engage in battle, outsmarting your opponent.
Yep.
It is required reading for executives at many Japanese companies, is recommended reading for all U.S. military intelligence personnel, was widely studied by the KGB, and Bill Belichick, head coach of the NFL's New England Patriots, who just won their record 6th Super Bowl under him, has used the lessons of the art of war in his strategic preparations for football games. Again, one of the most influential texts in history.
That was Panzerkampf, chapter number 9 from The Art of War. See you next week.
On the Sabaton History Channel.
All right, everyone. Remember to subscribe to Sabaton History, the regular Sabaton channel. Check out World War II and Time Ghost as well, all right? Right here, we got a playlist. More videos like this. It's good. You want to click this. And also, remember to support us on Patreon. That's what makes things like this happen. Take care and see you on the road.
You know, that's... I so can't wait to watch their concerts. That to me is where the actual, like, fun part. This part is the learning part, which is still fun, but the enjoyment. I go back to watching the song about the 30-Year War and just watching that crowd sing along and how emotional it was, and just that feeling and being overwhelmed with emotion. I can tell that they bring that out. This is just a great song. It fits the particular battle perfectly. I see why it's popular. And I think Par's right. You know, the lyrics are simple enough to sing along, that along with the beat, it just makes it one of those that people can attach themselves to very easily. That's just a songwriting, I don't want to say secret, because it's really not a secret, but it's a psychology, you know, of when you're putting music together, how you create it to where there's things that get attached to people in order to sing along easier, right? When you talk about the chorus, a catchy chorus that people can not relate to, right? I mean, obviously you saw Swedish Flags. I think it was Swedish Flags up there, of people singing along about the Soviet Union, right? It's more of, yeah, I mean, it's just a catchy tune that people can latch on to. It's hard to explain the psychology behind it. I look forward to more of these. I don't know which one I'm going to do next. I've kind of reversed how I do this, and I'm looking at the titles of the Sabaton history episodes to then go look up the song. Because I've gone through a couple songs and then I didn't see a history for them. So I'm like, okay, let me just do the reverse. So we'll see what comes up on Wednesday, but that's going to do it for this one. Y'all know who I am and what I'm about. I'm JTMM. Like, subscribe, and share. I'm out.